Welcome to our breakout decks roundup for Pokemon Pocket this week. There were a ton of sweet off-meta things that spiked deep runs into various tournaments. Today's video is going to cover a variety of things fresh in the format that had 70+% win rates in some of Pokemon Pocket's largest events in the last week. We're going to kick things off this week with a Blastoise EX Tauros deck that I personally put together and then played to a 7-2 finish for top 16 out of over 650 competitors. Someone else took the same 20 cards and played it to an 8-2 finish in Ursi Day's tournament this week as well, which had almost 2,000 players in it. I think this core is absolutely phenomenal, specifically Druddigon, Tauros alongside Leaf and Giovanni gives you a lot of flexibility in exactly how you flesh out the details. Having 400 HP basic Pokemon that only give up one knockout point when they get cleared gives you a lot of flexibility to stall the game and set up whatever attacker you want. Tauros lines up phenomenally into a ton of meta decks right now, especially when paired with Giovanni. You clear Pikachus, Mews, Celebes, even things like Arcanine after they've attacked. And if you combine it with Druddigon's Pokemon ability, you can deal 20 to a Mewtwo EX that's knocking out your Dragon, knocking it to 130 as well, so Tauros can come in and clean it up after the fact. Blastoise is also pretty solid inside of this deck. When we combine it with Misty, we get some high roll effects to let us blast people ahead of the time, getting free wins, but the consistency in this card is also pretty reasonable as well. Having 180 HP means you can take a hit from something like Mewtwo's Side Drive, and the way its second attack is templated, Blastoise EX is actually one of the best finishers in the game in terms of lining up into Mew EX, because Mew EX's genome hacking won't deal 160 unless it also has a pile of water energy on it. If you want to see this deck in action, I actually posted a tournament run of my 7-2 performance on the channel, and I'll link that in the video description down below. Up next, we have a Gengar EX deck that put up an 8-2 record for a top 4 finish out of over 400 competitors this week. We have the full Gengar line, which is frontlined by Mew EX and a single copy of Jinx. I think Mew EX has a wonderful amount of flexibility in these psychic cores. It can deal damage for you, which is key in matchups like the fighting decks, where they're going to be having things like Hitmonlee that could normally pressure your Ghastly while it's setting up. It can also just tank damage as 130 HP basic, and you kind of tie the whole room together with genome hacking, giving you flexibility to have Mew be a finisher for you in matchups like Charizard and Mewtwo. This deck list also gets leveraged some other fantastic Mythical Island additions with Mythical Slab, making everything slightly more consistent for you, and Budding Expeditioner doing its best Koga impersonation, pulling Mew out of harm's way before it can give up valuable knockout points. This Pidgeot EX Druddigon deck had a 6-2 record, finishing 18th place out of almost 300 competitors in one of our tournaments this week. One of the things in my mind that's really appealing about playing Pidgeot EX as your finisher behind Druddigon is that only needing colorless energy means that you get to play fire and water, giving you the flexibility for Druddigon to attack periodically, not just be a meat shield that you're hiding behind. Dealing 90 damage in one go on a basic lines up quite well into a variety of things like the fighting decks that have been running around that are typically packed full of 80 hit point Pokemon that you can clear in one go. Notable inclusions in this Pidgeot deck are the full 2 copies of Pokeflute, so that way you can keep your Pidgeot EX blasting at absolute maximum efficiency until the game is over, as well as a singleton Budding Expeditioner to pair with Mew EX, so Mew can kind of be a third stall Pokemon while you set up your powerful Stage 2 to close the game out. This Venusaur Executor deck had a 7-3 record, finishing 8th place out of almost 150 players in a tournament this week. Like we talked about in yesterday's meta report, I think Executor EX in particular is quite powerful and well positioned right now, and I think the addition of Mew EX from Mythical Island really does a solid job of shoring up some of Venusaur's more problematic matchups, in particular things like Mewtwo and Charizard EX that are going to blast our big tanky finisher in a single blow, get countered by Mew EX rather cleanly. I think Venusaur is a card that seems quite appealing into some of these smaller attacking decks that have become popular in the format, such as the fighting variations trying to leverage Marshadow. This honest Arcanine EX deck featuring Salazzle and Heatmore as its frontline had a 6-2 record, finishing 35th place out of almost 400 competitors. I think Arcanine EX in particular is a card that's really well positioned in the format right now, especially in tandem with the 2 copies of Giovanni that we see in this deck list. Similar to Tauros, like I was talking about earlier, there's just a ton of EX Pokemon with 120 and 130 life in the current metagame that Arcanine is phenomenal at clearing out in a one go. I like the angle that this deck is taking of frontlining with energy efficient single knockout point Pokemon. You set up your Salazzle and your Heatmore with 1 energy to start pumping out some damage to begin the game, and then you slowly build up your Arcanine over the course of the next few turns, getting it to 3 energy to bring it up into the active spot and close things out once it's ready, as opposed to being all in on accelerating it with a Moltres like we've seen in the other more common Arcanine builds. If you enjoy dealing 80 damage for just 2 energy, this Marowak EX Aerodactyl EX deck could be the one for you. With a 7-2 record, finishing 12th out of 150 players, this deck list is going to get damage online quickly and hit hard and fast. This deck list looks like it should absolutely devour the smaller fighting decks in the pseudo mirror, and having access to Hitmonlee gives you a strong matchup into all of the Druddigon stall decks that are looking to get set up while hiding behind a Dirtily Dragon. One thing that's really nice about this build is because you're leaning on Aerodactyl as one of your Pokemon, your Pokeballs are going to be really consistent in helping you get that Hitmonlee early, despite the fact that we're playing 5 basic Pokemon to set up 2 different EX attacker lines. A truly novel build of Gyarados featuring a singleton Caterpie Metapod Butterfree had an 8-2 record, finishing 65th out of almost 2,000 competitors in the Ursi Day tournament this week. It's playing the typical Druddigon frontline stall as well, but I think the idea of this build is really pretty interesting. Because Caterpie's Find a Friend ability only takes colorless energy, you get to play a singleton of each of your stage 2 evolution, letting Caterpie fish it up pretty freely against any other deck that's looking to stall to start, and then Butterfree lets you keep your Gyarados alive longer so you can keep blasting in things like the mirror match. Because this deck list only has to play 1 of each of its secondary Pokemon evolutions, it has extra room to play copies like 2 things of blue to make it so this is a Gyarados deck that isn't just auto losing to things like Zebstrika and Hitmonlee, which have become more popular to counter the more common meta Gyarados deck. A new variation of the Hitmonlee Aerodactyl EX Fighting Core, this time featuring Onix, posted a 7-3 record in the Ursa Day tournament this week as well. One of the big upsides to playing Onix as opposed to the mix of Marshadow and Farfetch is that you can start dealing real amounts of damage, hitting for 70 per turn without having to give up a knockout point to start. It's also nice that Onix is a lot bulkier than something like Farfetch. You can even just sit behind it, stalling the game a little bit while you find and set up Aerodactyl EX if that's more profitable to be attacking with in your given game. Finally, a Melmetal Dragon variation featuring Mew EX as an alternative attacker posted a 5-2 record for a top 64 finish out of over 600 competitors in a tournament this week as well. This is a core that's felt very reasonable to me in my testing. I think Melmetal is one of the cards that really gained some value from people playing these Druddigon stall decks. You could put that Meltan up first and amass it freely when your opponent's lead Druddigon is in no danger of attacking you for any amount of damage. This allows you to simultaneously get a Melmetal set up online quickly while also building up a secondary attacker like Mew EX to close things out if Melmetal actually gets answered. Similar to things like Tauros and Arcanite EX that we talked about earlier today, I think Melmetal's 120 damage attack, especially in tandem with Giovanni, lines up really cleanly into a variety of things in the format that you love to be knocking out in a single go. I have to say, I'm absolutely loving how Mythical Island has shaped up the Pokemon Pocket metagame overall. It feels like tools such as Druddigon and Tauros and Mew EX gave us phenomenal ways to attack the popular decks in the format, so off-meta ones like we're featuring here today can really have a chance. I'm going to be excited to see if any of these deck lists can start putting up some consistent results and perhaps introduce themselves as a more permanent part of the metagame. As always, I'd love to hear in the comments down below what deck lists you've been finding success with. I'd also love to hear your thoughts from the regulars on if you enjoyed the fact that I split the off-meta decks highlights off into its own separate video this week, as opposed to just lumping them in to the back half of the meta review video that I posted yesterday. Also, if you made it this far and you haven't done so already, I'd encourage you to smash that like button. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. I'm always highlighting various off-meta decks that have proven success like these ones, as opposed to just playing them in random queues in the client and calling them good enough. If you enjoy data-driven Pokemon Pocket analysis, this is definitely one of the best channels for that on the internet. I'd love it if you'd come back again sometime in the future. Thanks for staying all the way through the end, and may your next pack be an excellent one.